Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. We are in the company of Pakistan's ambassador to France, Ghalib Iqbal. Welcome back. Welcome back as well to Time Magazine's Omar Warek, who joins us from London, and by France 24's very own Taha Siddiqui, who's covering the story of that bombing that targeted the Christian community last Sunday in an explosion in a playground, at least 73 killed there. Now, while the Prime Minister has been contending with those attacks in Lahore, his government has had to negotiate the lifting Wednesday of the siege of Parliament by Islamists supporting Mumtaz Qadri. Mumtaz Qadri was recently executed over the killing of Punjab's governor, who had wanted to reform the country's blasphemy law. Luke Shrego has the story.
Celebrating the end of their protest in Islamabad, radical Pakistani Islamists finally dispersed after several days of a tense standoff with authorities.
Nobody involved in blasphemy against the Holy Prophet will be given concessions, whether they be Asia Bibi or anybody else.
Asia Bibi, the Christian woman who's been in jail for 6 years for blasphemy. The protesters' demand for her execution was just one of many, including the imposition of Sharia law and the naming of Mumtaz Qadri as a martyr. Executed last month, he was hailed as a hero by extremist groups after he murdered secular Governor Salman Taseer in 2011 for his calling to ease Pakistan's strict blasphemy laws. While the protesters claimed the government had given them what they wanted, authorities said the case was anything but.
There was neither a written agreement, nor did anyone from the government have the authority to do so. There has been no agreement in writing whatsoever.
Authorities had been taking the protests seriously, with 7,000 security personnel on hand to act if needed. Given the recent suicide attack targeting Christians in Lahore that left scores of women and children dead, Pakistan's minorities are feeling further threatened as the government tries to deal with nationally entrenched extremism.
Omar Warek, you heard their authorities saying there's nothing in writing when it came to the lifting of that siege in Islamabad. What's your interpretation of what went down over 4 days outside Parliament?
Well, I think, first of all, it's outrageous that you had armed thugs, and that's what they are. We saw the pictures there where they're brandishing sticks, where they're using inflammatory hate speech, where they're making incendiary attacks on the Pakistani state itself, that they were indulged in this way. The fact that the Pakistani state feels that it should negotiate with thugs who threaten to hold them hostage, I think is deeply unfortunate. I'm not sure. Chaudhry Nassar insists that no deal was made. However, from the other side, there are a number of people who suggest that there was. In fact, there was a document circulating late yesterday which suggested that a series of concessions had been made. If that is the case, this is a very dangerous precedent. Unfortunately, the civilian government is weak to the extent, and we've seen this since we discussed this on your show in 2014, François, where mobs can gather in the center of Islamabad and try and hold the government hostage, extract concessions, and do so without actually having any legitimate voice within the Pakistani political system or using any of the many avenues for redress open to them under the Pakistani constitution. These are extra-constitutional and often illegal measures that these people are resorting to in a bid to intimidate the government and to, in fact, violate the mandate of the Pakistani people and try and bully the government into giving them concessions just because they're able to threaten the law and order situation in the capital.
So how should they have handled
property
it?
And branding strict. I think there should have been a series of arrests made, frankly, for the damage that was carried out There were metro bus stations there was property that was torched, property that has been built through taxpayers' money. There were hate speeches that were made, which are actually liable to prosecution under Pakistani law. We saw all manner of threats being issued against other citizens of Pakistan, including minorities, religious minorities. We saw the threat being issued against Asia Bibi, for example, as well. I mean, it makes you wonder why these tens of thousands of thugs are scared of a poor Christian farmhand who is, I think, 50 years old by now, mother of 5, languishing in a jail.
The case of Asia Bibi, several points in there, but let's first talk about the case of Asia Bibi, sentenced by a lower court to death. Her case is to be heard by an upper court. In this particular case, what's going to happen? The court claims the protesters claimed that in her case that they had guarantees from the government they wouldn't intervene in any way.
I think the court has taken a decision and we should await the outcome of the final decision by the higher court. And at the moment, if we say that Asia Bibi's case is not being handled properly by Pakistan, I think that would not be true, because all the basic medical facilities, all the basic facilities which have to be provided to any person accused of a crime have been provided to her. Pakistan does not look at it as a case to harm the minority. Pakistan is looking at it as a judicial case. And there are 254 cases of blasphemy in Pakistan, out of which only 9 are non-Muslims. Rest all of them are Muslims. So the courts have to decide and they have to arrive at a decision what is best for them. If somebody had talked maybe about a year ago, 2 years ago, or 3 years ago in fact, thinking that Mumtaz Qadri, the assassin of Governor Salman Taseer, would be executed was unthinkable. But we have crossed those thresholds. We have moved ahead. And Pakistan is taking all the decisions. All these things which happened with Pakistan, including terrorism or a breakdown, it did not happen in one day. So it's going to take some longer period to fix things.
And to Omar Rick's contention that there should have been arrests during that sit-in for the violence caused and the damage done and the hate speech.
Yeah, I agree with him. That should have been done, and it is going to happen because the Interior Minister has clearly stated on the TV, and he's on record saying that all those who have damaged the property and were involved in a subversive activity, they would be tried. But all others who have been protesting, they have a right to protest. Today we have a protest in France. We had the protest, a big protest recently. These protesters have the right to protest against anything they want to. But the main issue is that law and order should not be taken into their hands, and they should not harm people or destroy the property. In this case, a few people have done that, and it is the law enforcement agencies are going to nab them. In fact, a few have already been arrested.
It's the second time in less than a year that the Prime Minister has faced this kind of pressure outside of Parliament. Just how weak is the government in the face of such protests?
It's not the question of the weakness of the government, François. I think if you look at the location of that square in Islamabad, it's for this reason that yesterday the decision was taken that henceforth no demonstrations would be allowed over there, because it can break the movement of traffic from point A to point B. And since it goes through the main Constitution Avenue, where all the ministries and main offices are located, it becomes difficult for the people to operate and work over there. It is for this reason, I think it's the location of that square which created the problem.
Taha Siddiqui, is there any link between the offshoot of the Taliban that claimed responsibility for the attack in Lahore and those who were protesting outside Parliament?
Well, those are two different groups. We do know that the Taliban, or the ones who claim responsibility for the Lahore attack, those groups, those militants belong to a different school of thought. The Barelvis belong to a different school of thought. Mainly the Barelvis were the ones who were leading this protest in Islamabad. But in a sense that we've seen that in Pakistan over history, how the evolution of these different school of thoughts have happened. The Deobandi school of thought, which was used for jihad in Afghanistan, or before that in Kashmir, or in other regional players, it has been used as proxy. Last few years, we've seen that there has been this effort to bring in the Barelvi school of thought, which used to be sort of the one that would believe in Sufism and would believe in pluralistic values. But then they've taken up this particular cause of blasphemy, and we've seen that in this particular case, for example, with Mumtaz Qadri, when the funeral happened, hundreds and thousands of people, there were around more than 100,000 people, according to local and international estimates, which gathered for the funeral. Then there was this, and the government tried to sort of execute Mumtaz Qadri on 29th of February, probably because some people say that because his anniversary might not be celebrated for another 4 years, but they didn't wait for a few weeks also, and they were already out on the roads. So we saw further radicalization. So in a way, this is what we were discussing also with some analysts, and this is what they say, that Pakistan and somehow the other, for example, the Pakistani media, they were told to completely black out these protests. So internationally we saw them, but locally there was a complete blackout. I mean, in the sense that the media said that they should not glorify them, but they did not show them at all. So there was a blackout. These thousands of people came in, and on the basis of that, further thousands of more have been radicalized. We've seen that there's a tomb.
So let me ask you about that. Let me ask you about that, Tal.
Outside.
Because we were saying earlier yesterday that there seems to be this gap now in Pakistan, right, between those who are have the money to go to school and those who don't have the money to go to school and instead go to these Quranic schools, these madrasas, and that the gulf is widening, and that the common thread between different various stripes of Islamists is that they want Sharia to be the law of the land. Is that true?
Well, in the sense that madrasas, we do get foot soldiers from there. There are these number of protesters or these suicide attackers. Such foot soldiers do come from them. But the main ideology, or the main the main perpetrators, or the main planners, or the masterminds, for that matter, are not people who are going to madrasas. They're people who are in the mainstream schooling. They're educated. They're engineers, for example, or other. They're from the business backgrounds, and these are very educated people. The thing is that the problem of radicalization in Pakistan is not solely because of madrasas or because of the fact that there's a tribal belt or Afghanistan. It's because of the way the state has carried out this radicalization and allowed it to evolve through schools, through education, through curriculum, and through allowing such people to exist and then using them for their own strategic objectives in the region.
Ambassador?
I think partially I would agree with Taha, because when we talk about madrasa is not a place where radicalization is being done in all the madrasas. There are a few madrasas where the radicalization is being done. I agree to him up to that extent. And saying that the government is using these radicalized people to advance our own objectives, I think that probably would not be correct. You talked about the gap between the people who can afford the fee and people who cannot afford the fee. Madrasas are not only for people who cannot afford the fee, but madrasas are also for people who afford the fee. And at times you can see it as a business being carried out in Pakistan by a few people. At times you can see that it is being done on the basis of ideology. At times it is being done as a philanthropist activity. And at times it is being done to radicalize people. So there are different categories of madrasas, and only a few, I would say, are involved in radicalization.
Radicalization, and it's drawn discussion, the praise that has been heaped upon this man, Mr. Qadri, who was executed a few weeks ago. Last week, we discovered that over social networking site WhatsApp, the spiritual leader of Scotland's biggest mosque Habib-ur-Rahman had praised Qadri, saying a true Muslim was punished for doing that which the collective will of the nation failed to carry out. He was asked to explain those remarks. He said they were a private issue. They'd been leaked by an unauthorized third party. They misconstrued and took out of context his criticism of the judicial process in Pakistan. What's your reaction to that, Omar Warwick?
Well, it's very alarming. I mean, recently we also saw an Ahmadi man who was killed in Scotland. And so there is this problem where people are bringing their prejudices and their bigotry over from Pakistan and trying to import it here. In Pakistan, part of the problem is actually one about the rule of law. The fact that stronger action wasn't taken after Salman Taseer was killed opened up the space for people to claim that it is okay for people to take the law into their own hands and act as vigilantes the way Qadri had done. A number of people actually took this position in the media and weren't contradicted because there was an environment of fear. You asked earlier, François, what the connection between these two groups is, the one in Islamabad and the one who attacked in Lahore. The one connection, if there is one, is that they're both content to target the religious minorities in Pakistan. One of the groups did it through violence by, in the most gruesome circumstances, massacring a group of people, many of whom were Muslim, most of whom were Muslim, but they targeted the Christian community in Lahore on Easter Sunday. And instead of actually condoling with the families who lost their loved ones in Lahore, you had a group of thugs in Islamabad whose only agenda was to say that they want to see harsher treatment meted out to religious minorities in Pakistan who are dubiously accused of blasphemy by laws that are vaguely worded and are often used as a means of prosecuting a vendetta. I think the state needs to take a very strong line in terms of these things and say, actually, religious minorities are equal citizens in Pakistan. And anyone who seeks to classify them as otherwise or issue threats has to be dealt with. There has to be zero tolerance on this.
Ambassador, on that point, again, we said at the outset, 2.5 million Christians in Pakistan. What more can be done to protect them? Because obviously we had the attack last year against 2 churches in Lahore. Now we've had this. We have the case of Asia Bibi, which we discussed.
I think, again, as I said in the beginning of the program, let's not divide the victims on the basis of religion, because it's important to know. We have lost over 64,000 people in Pakistan. And you talk to anybody in Pakistan, because Taha and Umar, they are referring to the people who are extremists. And you need to talk to the people who are the silent majority within our country. People who agree to the court's decisions, people who agree that things are going in the right track, people who agree that we have a hope, people who understand that Pakistan is going to come out of this whole situation. It's not against the Christians. The Constitution provides adequate securities to all the religious minorities. But you cannot blame Pakistan or the government or the country if a minority talks ill about a minority of extremists talk ill about the religious minorities. We should not take it as a position undertaken by Pakistan as a policy. It is totally different from the government, from Pakistan, and from the Pakistanis.
One final question, and I'll put it to you, Omar Warwick. Those remarks we talked about by that imam in Scotland, they happened in January over that social media site, but they were published last week in the wake of the Brussels attacks. Is it the same ideology in Islamabad, in Lahore, in Brussels?
No, I think we're talking about different phenomena here. And So, for example, as Taha mentioned about the Brailvis, who are mostly considered to be a mystical and largely and a sect with a history of tolerance. I mean, for example, when it comes to processions led by Shia Muslims in Pakistan on Muharram, the Brailvis are generally supportive and don't see Shias as separate to the rest of it. But on this point of blasphemy, they do have a very particular attitude, which we've seen in Islamabad can take on very, very extreme proportions. When it comes to Brussels and Lahore, those two events are tied, in the sense that we have terrorist groups who are seeking to indiscriminately kill people and cause a maximum number of casualties to secure maximum publicity for their cause.
Omar Warwick, I want to thank you for joining us from London. I want to thank Taha Siddiqui, who is in Lahore reporting for France 24, and the Pakistan's ambassador to France, Ghalib Iqbal. Well, thanks to you as well. Stay with us. Our Media Watch segment is next. And we say hello to James Creedon.
Good evening, François. So just to take a look at how this has played out on news websites and social media, we'll start with an article on France TV Info, the website of the French news broadcaster. Marginalised and persecuted, the hell of Christians in Pakistan. So there's been a lot of coverage of this. It's put the spotlight on the persecution of, or the perceived persecution of the Christian community at large. I think it's been discussed already in the debate, so I'm not sure we need to go into that. But they have interviewed, for example, the French NGO Porte Ouverte France, or Open Doors France, which deals with the persecution of Christians around the world. They say from 2006, when Pakistan was ranked as the 16th place in terms of a global index of persecution of Christians, that has gone up to 6th place in 2016. So, I mean, this is what they look at. They look at the persecution of Christians, and obviously with recent attacks, it has gone up in the ranks. They also spoke in this article to Jean-Luc Racine, who is a researcher. Now, he is looking at the fact that the Taliban claimed this attack. He's saying that this is an explicit message to the government, to the Pakistani government, in response to the anti-terrorist policy which has been put in place. And it essentially says, we are here in Punjab, which is the most important electoral heartland. So it's not just to persecute the Christians. It's being interpreted as well as a message to the government, as sort of against anti-terrorist policies. So that's just one aspect of what we're seeing in terms of analysis online. Obviously, then on social media, François, a lot of sympathy for the victims, hashtags such as Pray for Lahore, also Lahore blasts, and people obviously just expressing their humanity and their sympathy with the victims. You also have a lot of journalists who've been going to the bedsides of the survivors, and with messages of hope, I suppose, amongst the pain. Celebrities as well who've been taking to social media to express their upset and their horror. So there's been a whole range of that. Just to take one, Shafkat Amanat Ali, who is a Lahore-based composer and singer, and he says the victims of the blasts don't need your sympathy or mine, they need our support in fighting back. So a message of defiance there. Just one other element that we've seen a lot of in social media over the last couple of days from a French perspective, the fact that there wasn't perhaps quite the same degree of solidarity expressed with Pakistan as there was with Belgium. That did get a certain amount of coverage. The fact that the Eiffel Tower wasn't lit up in the colours of the Pakistani flag. It did become a debate. People talking about, I suppose, unequal responses. Others replying to that of course, Brussels is just over the border and the capital of the EU. So perhaps it is normal that France responded perhaps with greater solidarity there. But others saying that the spotlight should be put on Pakistan in the same way. Each human life is of the same value.
All right, many thanks for that, James Creedon. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.